The final week of December arrived with an unusual stillness. Cold air drifted through the narrow streets as if the wind itself was whispering warnings. I wrapped my scarf tighter, feeling the sharp sting of winter press against my skin. Lights flickered across the neighborhood, glowing faintly through the mist that hovered close to the ground. The town felt quiet, too quiet, as if December was holding its breath. I stepped outside my house and felt the crunch of frost beneath my shoes. The air tasted metallic, cold enough to make each breath feel heavy. A strange uneasiness settled in my chest. Something felt off. Something felt hidden. The sky above me was a pale shade of silver, clouded, thick, and unmoving. I could hear distant wind chimes that belonged to no house near mine. Their sound trembled in the frozen air. I followed the sound down the street, every step slower than the last. Shadows stretched across the snow, long and thin, as if they were reaching for my footsteps. My fingers tingled with the cold, but the sensation carried an edge of nervousness that had nothing to do with winter. I reached the old park at the end of the road. The swings moved gently, though there was no wind strong enough to push them. A thin layer of snow coated the seats, untouched, yet they swayed as if someone invisible had just risen from them. My throat tightened. I turned my gaze toward the far corner of the park. There was a bench under a dying maple tree, its branches bare and trembling. A small box sat on the bench. Unmarked. Frozen. Waiting. My heartbeat thudded louder in my ears. The atmosphere grew heavier, as if the cold wrapped itself around my thoughts. I stepped closer, feeling the snow shift beneath me with soft, muffled cracks. The air seemed to thicken around the box. My breath came in short, visible streams. I reached out slowly. The box felt colder than the surrounding air, as if it held winter inside it. My fingertips tingled sharply. I hesitated, feeling a strange tug in my chest, a warning that grew louder and heavier. I lifted the lid. Inside was a single photograph. It showed my house, but the windows were dark. The door was open, and a shadow stood on the porch. A tall, thin silhouette. My hands trembled as I lifted the picture closer. The shadow had no face, no features, just a shape that looked like it was waiting for me. I felt a sudden gust of cold sweep across my back. The swings stopped moving. The wind chimes fell silent. The air pressed in around me, heavy and sharp. I looked up. Someone stood at the edge of the park. The same tall shape, the same faceless outline, completely still. Snowflakes drifted around it but did not touch it. My breath froze midway in my throat. The figure tilted its head, slow and deliberate. It started walking toward me. Each step silent, each movement smooth. The cold deepened, pushing into my bones. My heartbeat hammered against my ribs. The photograph slipped from my hands and landed softly on the snow. I stepped backward, but the figure advanced with steady, measured steps. Its presence seemed to swallow the air around it. The world felt smaller, quieter, tighter. I tried to speak, but my voice refused to rise. The figure came closer, nearly close enough for me to feel a coldness radiating from it that was far beyond winter. My legs stiffened. The light around the park dimmed as if December itself had begun to close its final chapter around me. The shadow raised an arm, pointing behind me. Slowly, deliberately, I turned my head with a trembling breath, and saw my own footprints in the snow. But there were more footprints beside them. Fresh ones. Footprints that did not belong to me. Footsteps that started from nowhere and followed right behind mine all the way from my house. The figure took another step. And another. The cold around me thickened almost into sound, heavy and sharp like breaking ice. Something shifted in the air. Something I had not noticed. Something moving closer from behind. I felt the presence behind me before I fully turned. The air grew heavier, as if something pressed against the back of my neck with an icy palm. My breath thickened in the cold, forming a trembling cloud in front of me. I turned slowly, feeling my muscles resist, as though the winter air itself wanted to hold me still. Behind me, the snow glistened under the dim December sky, untouched except for the trail of footprints that did not belong to me. The footprints were deep, heavy. Each step seemed to sink lower into the frozen ground than any human foot should. I stared at them, unable to move. The footprints led toward me in a perfect line. They stopped just a few steps behind where I stood. Yet there was nothing visible there. Nothing but the feeling. A feeling that curled around my spine and tightened its grip. The tall faceless figure ahead of me remained silent and still. It did not take another step. It simply watched. The stillness of its posture pressed into my chest, making my heart beat faster. I felt trapped between the unseen presence behind me and the faceless figure in front. The wind finally rose, but it carried no warmth. It sliced through the air like a thin blade, cutting across my cheeks and making my eyes sting. The branches overhead rattled with dry, brittle sounds. The old maple tree shuddered, sending down a drift of loose frost. My hands trembled uncontrollably. I tried to inhale deeply, but the cold filled my lungs with a sharp ache. The park felt smaller now. The sky dimmed further, as though the clouds were lowering themselves closer to the ground, pressing the world into a tighter space. The swings did not move anymore. The entire park felt frozen in time. I forced myself to step backward, toward the footprints. One step, another. The snow crunched softly beneath my shoes, but the sound felt distant, as if it belonged to someone else. The air behind me felt colder with every step, as if I were moving into the breath of something unseen. When I reached the place where the footprints stopped, a tremor ran down my spine. I felt something there, something close enough to touch the back of my coat if it reached forward. I stood perfectly still, afraid to turn again. My heartbeat echoed in my ears like distant drumbeats. The faceless figure in front tilted its head again. Slowly, deliberately. The movement was smooth, almost unnatural. It pointed once more, but this time not at my footprints. It pointed past me. It pointed toward the row of small houses lined along the street. Lights were off in every window. Doors closed. The entire neighborhood looked abandoned. I felt another shift in the air, a pressure that pushed against my back, urging me to move. I finally gathered enough strength to turn my head slightly. A dark outline emerged from the shadows between two houses. Tall, still, watching. A second silhouette, identical to the one standing in the park. My breath caught sharply in my throat. The first figure still watched me. The second one remained half hidden, its edges blending into the night like ink bleeding into water. A faint ringing sound drifted through the cold air, thin and metallic. It grew louder, clearer, as if someone was striking a small piece of metal with rhythm and intention. The sound echoed around me, bouncing between the houses and the empty park. My heartbeat matched its rhythm. Slow, heavy, uneven. The snow beneath me shifted slightly, as if something moved beneath the surface. I stepped back again, farther from the first figure, closer toward the open street. The second figure stepped forward at the exact same moment. Its movement was smooth and silent. Its feet made no sound in the snow. No imprint followed its steps. The first figure moved as well. A single step, slow enough to show that it was choosing its pace with intention. My breath quickened. My legs felt stiff, but instinct forced them to move. I turned fully and started walking toward the street. Each step felt heavy, like I was dragging invisible weights behind me. I did not run. I could not run. The air was too thick, too cold, too heavy for speed. A faint hum vibrated under my feet. The ground felt alive, as if something large and hidden shifted deep below the frozen soil. The wind rose again, swirling snow around me in tight circles. It brushed against my face with a strange sensation. Cold, but not natural. Sharp, almost metallic, like frozen breath drawn from deep underground. I reached the first streetlight. Its glow flickered above me, trembling. The light dimmed, brightened, dimmed again, as if the bulb fought against something swallowing its brightness. I looked back. Both figures stood at the edge of the park. Still, silent, watching. But there was something different now. They stood closer together, almost aligned, like two shadows cut from the same shape. I did not want to keep watching them, yet something in their stillness held my gaze. I felt the sense of being followed again. Not by footprints, not by movement, by presence. An invisible pressure that walked behind me. A sound reached me, a soft crackling, like thin ice breaking beneath a heavy weight. I turned my head slightly. Another set of footprints appeared behind me. Fresh, close, Each step formed slowly, one after another, pressed into the snow by something I could not see. The steps were coming toward me. Closer and closer. I stumbled back, nearly losing my footing. My chest tightened so sharply that I gasped. The streetlight above me flickered once more. The hum beneath the ground grew louder. The air tasted faintly of iron. I moved backward toward my house, my eyes locked on the approaching invisible footsteps and the two silent figures at the edge of the park. The snow crunched under a new weight behind me. A chill crawled along my spine. The footsteps stopped only a few feet away. I did not turn. I could not turn. The silence deepened around me. The night thickened like a curtain drawn too tightly. Somewhere in the distance, a bell rang softly. A slow, deliberate ring that carried through the frozen air. A ring that did not belong to any church in the town. The figures at the park edge began to move again. Slow, steady, purposeful. Their steps matched the silent presence behind me. The ground trembled ever so slightly. The air tightened around my throat. The December night felt alive. Watching, waiting, and something cold hovered close enough to brush against the back of my neck. The cold presence behind me lingered for a long moment, as if it measured the air between us. I stood still, unable to breathe deeply, waiting for whatever waited behind me to reveal itself. My heartbeat pounded in my throat with a slow, heavy rhythm. The two figures at the park edge took one final step forward. Their movements were synchronized, steady, and impossibly silent. The ground did not sink beneath their weight. The snow did not react to their presence. They moved like shadows shaped out of winter air. The invisible footsteps behind me appeared once more. One step, then another, close enough that the sound felt like a whisper against my spine. I finally gathered the courage to turn. The air stirred as I moved, as if the presence behind me stepped back at the same time. My breath formed a thin, trembling mist. I turned fully and saw nothing but the fresh line of footprints in the snow, now forming a complete path that led directly from my house to where I stood. The cold loosened slightly, as if the invisible figure had simply stepped away. For a moment, the world felt strangely quiet. I looked toward the park. The two faceless figures no longer stood there. The space where they had been was completely empty. Even the frost on the ground looked undisturbed, as if they had never existed at all. A sudden gust of wind swept across the street, carrying with it a new softness. The air felt lighter. The pressure that had tightened around my chest slowly faded. The metallic taste in the air dissolved into the ordinary chill of December. I knelt and picked up the fallen photograph. The shadow on the porch was gone. The door of my house was closed. The windows glowed warmly in the picture, as if the house had come back to life. The image felt warm in my hand, even though the air around me was freezing. I turned the photo over. A single line was written on the back in thin, uneven handwriting. It said only one thing. Go home. I looked up at the silent street, the snow-covered rooftops, and the dim lights flickering gently inside the houses. Everything felt normal again, quiet, but not in the unsettling way from before. Instead, the quiet felt peaceful, like the last calm breath of the year. I walked home slowly. My steps were steady. My heartbeat returned to its natural rhythm. The wind brushed against my face, no longer sharp or unnatural. The sky above me softened from silver to a muted shade of blue. When I reached my house, I placed my hand on the door. The wood was warm, steady, alive. I opened the door and stepped inside. A soft glow filled the room. Familiar warmth settled around me like a blanket. The air smelled faintly of cinnamon and old books, the scent of quiet winter evenings. I locked the door gently behind me. Outside, the wind carried away the last traces of the strange December night. The park lights flickered back to life. The neighborhood breathed again. I placed the photograph on the table and watched it for a long moment. Its edges curled slightly as if the warmth of the house affected it. The image felt peaceful now. Complete. A sense of stillness filled me, not frightening but comforting, like the year itself had finally decided to rest. I took one deep breath and let it go. The last night of December had closed its final chapter. Not with fear, not with darkness, but with a reminder that every year leaves something behind. Something unseen, something understood only when the last quiet moment arrives. I looked out the window. Snow began to fall again. Soft, gentle, peaceful, a December to remember, and a year ready to end with grace.